Raymond is 58, and he knows his pickup truck intimately. He knows the exact speed where the steering wheel starts a low hum. He knows the paint on the hood is losing its battle with the sun, and the driver's door takes exactly 2 pulls to close. Every morning, Raymond parks that truck next to a coworker's brand-new SUV. It is pristine, featuring screens the size of laptops, and a lane departure system that beeps loudly if the tires drift a millimeter off-center. When they walk into the office together, Raymond occasionally catches a specific expression on his coworker's face. It is a look of quiet pity, the kind that assumes Raymond is struggling to get by, stuck in a rut, or lacking the ambition to upgrade his life. But the assumption is wrong. Raymond is a senior engineer. He could walk into a dealership today and buy that exact SUV in cash. He simply chooses not to. The gap between these two drivers has nothing to do with their bank accounts. It comes down to a different way of processing satisfaction. In a culture built on the pressure to constantly replace what we own, holding on to an aging vehicle requires a specific kind of psychological immunity. It reveals a person whose sense of worth is no longer tethered to external validation. To understand Raymond's choice, we have to look at what is happening inside his coworker's brain. The urge to constantly upgrade is a biological drive powered by dopamine. This graph plots how our brains separate desire from enjoyment. Neuroscientists have found that dopamine fuels the wanting, the thrill of the chase. It spikes when you anticipate buying a new car, but that chemical surge barely touches whether you actually enjoy the vehicle once it sits in your driveway. Researchers call this hedonic adaptation. That new car thrill flatlines after about 3 weeks. The liking curve stays at baseline, and the brain's wanting machine resets to 0, already hunting for the next thing to trigger a new spike. The constant upgrader is trapped on a biological treadmill that never reports back as full. Raymond recognized the trap years ago and quietly stepped off. That older vehicle escapes the dopamine cycle because it taps into a different psychological mechanism, the extended self. Over a decade, the vehicle transforms into a physical hard drive for unrepeatable memories. This truck hauled the lumber for a backyard deck. It sat idling in a hospital parking lot during the longest night of your life. It carried a daughter to college, the back seat buried under boxes she swore she needed. This emotional weight pairs with a brutal financial reality. The average monthly payment for a new car now exceeds $700. Perpetually restarting that payment cycle drains a fortune in potential wealth. Financial experts like Suze Orman recognize this math immediately. She holds on to her own vehicles for 10 to 15 years, treating a car as a tool for long-term security rather than a status symbol. Selling a reliable 10-year-old car means discarding a wealth-building tool and a biological anchor. For the long-term owner, no trade-in value makes that exchange worthwhile. Modern life is a state of constant adaptation, notifications, forced software updates, and the pressure of endless choices. This animation illustrates the physical impact of what psychologists call the mere exposure effect. Familiarity physically calms the human nervous system. The more the brain recognizes a pattern, the more it trusts the environment. A 10-year-old car functions as a zone of neurological peace. It requires 0 learning curve and 0 performance. You know every sound and every dial by touch. Compare that to the low-level anxiety of a pristine, complex new machine that beeps at every lane departure and requires constant vigilance to protect it from the first scratch. In an overstimulating world, simplicity is a highly optimized strategy to preserve mental peace. When Raymond and his coworkers sit side by side at a red light, we are seeing 2 different ways to live. One driver is performing for an audience. The other is simply driving home. The philosopher Erich Fromm described 2 modes of existence. There is the having mode, where you define yourself by what you possess,
And there is the being mode, where your worth comes from who you actually are. Modern advertising survives by blurring these modes. It takes a deep internal need, like the desire for confidence, and disguises it as a requirement to buy a luxury vehicle. It sells you a being need wrapped in a having transaction. The hold this cycle has on a person breaks the moment they ask a dangerous question. What if what I already have is enough? When self-worth detaches from possessions, a person becomes impossible to sell to and impossible to shame. Their confidence comes from a source the market can't touch. Listen for the exhausting background hum of comparison in your own life. Identify the one old thing you refuse to replace, and notice how much calmer you feel when you stop asking strangers for permission to be happy. That fading 10-year-old car stands as quiet, undeniable proof of a person who has finally stopped asking the world to tell them they've made it.